July hockey content trade! My goodness, it's July 17th and we have a trade to announce. Kind of an interesting trade with potential long and short-term implications. And it's getting the band back together, isn't it? Because the Toronto Maple Leafs have acquired Dakota Joshua from the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for a 2028 fourth round pick. Now, what the Leafs gave up in this deal is very easy to deal with right away. That is a 2028 fourth round pick. That is a fourth round pick 3 drafts from now. I do not care. If the Canucks or whoever ends up owning that draft pick at that time makes a good pick with that pick and they go on to make it to the Hockey Hall of Fame, good for them. Good for their scouting staff. But that is a draft pick between 98th and 129th overall 3 years from now. The actual cost of getting Dakota Joshua, A-okay. Although it should be mentioned that a fourth round pick is more than the Leafs got for Dakota Joshua a few years ago, which that was future considerations, and I believe that turned into nothing. And you might be like, wait, the Leafs had Dakota Joshua a few years ago? Yeah, let me back up. Before I talk about what Dakota Joshua is, let's talk about what he was, which is the Leafs' 5th round pick from 2014. Drafted out of Dearborn, Michigan, he also played for the U.S. Developmental Program and the Sioux Falls Stampede of the USHL. In the next season, he actually won a championship with the Sioux Falls Stampede, and that team had some names. Kiefer Bellows was a first-round pick. He's played over 100 NHL games. Logan O'Connor, who won a cup with the Avalanche. And, of course, Dakota Joshua, who was 3rd on that team in scoring and one of 3 players to reach 20 goals. Did the Leafs sign him? No. Ended up trading him to the St. Louis Blues for future considerations, and they signed him. That happened in 2019, 5 years after Joshua was drafted by the Leafs. July 2019, which, as you might remember, was a great time to be a St. Louis Blue. They had just won the Stanley Cup, and wait a sec, who was their head coach? Ah, that's right, Craig Berube. Dakota Joshua played 42 games over parts of 2 seasons with the St. Louis Blues, and you're going to hear a lot of people talk about how Craig Berube was his head coach, but also Mike Van Ryn was assistant coach of those Blues. He's also assistant coach of the Leafs. So there's a lot of familiarity there. Now, why might Craig Berube and Mike Van Ryn, who coached the St. Louis Blues of that era, why might they like a player like Dakota Joshua? 6'3", 205 pounds, beef! Yeah, I said it, but they got a theme! Then Joshua goes to the Vancouver Canucks. No more splitting time between the NHL and the AHL. He is a full-time NHLer with the Canucks, and he excelled. First season with the Canucks, 79 games played, 11 goals, 12 assists, 23 points, and also beef. The following season, only 63 games played, but career highs in everything. 18 goals, career high, 14 assists, career high, 32 points, career high. And that might not sound all that high to you, and maybe it's not, but maybe this is a depth guy, and that's okay. But here's the part that might get your attention as a Leafs fan. You might remember a couple years ago, the Vancouver Canucks went to the playoffs. You might remember the Vancouver Canucks were pretty good. In 13 games played during those Stanley Cup playoffs in 2024, 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points. Can you imagine a 3rd or 4th liner, a bottom 6 guy, putting up 8 points in a playoff run with the Leafs? No, you can't. It's kind of hard. And you might be like, well, what about this guy? What about that guy? No, those were merely depth players who played in the top 6 because the team's stupid. 8 points actually tied Dakota Joshua for 5th on the Canucks in the 2024 playoffs in scoring. He had more points than Elias Pettersson. He had more points than Connor Garland. He had more points than Pius Suter. All those guys make so much money now. And after that incredible playoff run, Joshua was looking to build on that with the Canucks. Well, unfortunately, that's not what happened at all. Last offseason, Dakota Joshua was diagnosed with testicular cancer. That actually caused him to miss all of training camp, and obviously it's an enormous health scare. It's obviously treatable, and players have had it before and come back in relatively short order. Phil Kessel comes to mind. He didn't miss very much time. That guy was a rookie with the Boston Bruins when that happened. That's why he won the Masterton Trophy. And he would end up making his season debut with the Canucks on November 14th. So he only misses about a month of the season, but he also missed training camp, and it's just not the way any human being wants to start their season. Here's what he said upon his return to the Canucks lineup in November. It was a scary time, but I'm very thankful and just happy to be in this position still and be able to go out there and play. Much more complimentary, here's what Dakota Joshua's head coach at the time, Rick Tocchet, had to say. It's like making a major trade, Coach Tocchet said. He's a big kid that's got great hands. Obviously, he's played really well for this organization, especially last year, so we're really excited to have him back. He's gone through a lot of stuff, and I've loved the way he's dealt with it, and we're just happy for him. He also added, he's a well-liked kid. He's turned into a leader, too. He's got a big voice. It's a major thing for us right now. Yeah, the Vancouver Canucks in November 2024 were a team that needed big voices pretty bad. So, after returning to the lineup, did Dakota Joshua's season go all that great? No. In 57 games played, he had just 7 goals and 7 assists for 14 points. That's acceptable for a depth player if they bring a bunch of other things to your lineup, like size and grit and leadership, but not when they're making the amount of money that Joshua is. Because at this point, I've told you, they only gave up a 4th, and it's forever from now, and Joshua is big, and he's a playoff performer, and he's had all these good seasons. You might be like, what's the catch? Okay, well, here's the catch. He's entering year 2 of a 4-year deal, so he's got 3 years left, $3.25 million per season. The Canucks simply cannot afford to have that on their roster. They're in a situation. The Toronto Maple Leafs, however, actually kinda can. And that's not something we've been able to say over the past few years. They never have cap space. In fact, after this trade, they still have a little over $2 million in cap space, and they have Nick Robertson, who's going to salary arbitration. It's definitely possible that after Robertson signs his deal or gets traded or whatever happens, it's entirely possible that they still have cap space. And let me stop you right there. They're going to have even more than that. Because once the Leafs sign Nick Robertson, assuming they sign Nick Robertson, they're going to have 15 NHL forwards on Puckpedia's page. They're simply not going to do that. Like, literally not going to do that. They're not going to carry 3 extra forwards. You can do that. You can have 3 extras. It's dumb to have all 3 of those guys be forwards. And that's why they're not going to do it. They're going to trade guys away. Who knows who it's going to be? It could still be Nick Robertson. It could still be David Kampf. It could still be Calle Yarncroke. Who knows? Maybe it's Domi. I don't think it's going to be, but it's an option. I'm just going to put it out there that maybe there are options we haven't considered. Now, it's entirely possible Dakota Joshua is a $3.25 million 4th liner who's never going to get back to 15-ish goals again. In which case, 3.25 won't be great, especially not for 3 years. There's also a world where he just turns into a grittier Bobby McMahon, or they're just different versions of each other. One shoots lasers a little bit more, and the other's just kind of a jerk. We know Dakota Joshua will fight. You see that fight a few years ago? You remember. No, Steve, I don't remember. Okay, remember that time Mark Giordano fought against the Canucks and we all loved it? Yeah, that was Dakota Joshua. I think too many people are looking at the Leafs roster. Like, I made a roster video a few days ago, and people were like, yo, this team sucks. And listen, they might, but I think it's more likely that they're just not done. It's mid-July, and their work so far isn't bad. Like, check out this tweet from Neeler. Brad Treliving turned a 3rd, a 4th, and a player's rights of someone who's not returning into Nicholas Waugh, Matthias Michelli, and Dakota Joshua. Nicely done. Now, I do think it's very funny that a player's rights of someone not returning, that's Mitch Marner, man. Burying the lead a little bit with that one. But it is true, like, he wasn't coming back anyway. And you get Nicholas Waugh there. You get Matthias Michelli for a 3rd. And you get Dakota Joshua for a 4th. It's also worth mentioning, Michelli didn't have a good year last year. Neither did Joshua. You could pretty convincingly argue that the guy who had the best season last year was Nicholas Waugh. He's definitely the most solid bet. But if these bets hit, they're going to be big. Like, dude, even at 14 points last season, Dakota Joshua, if he was a free agent this summer, what does he get? And before you answer that, I'm going to remind you, Tanner Jeannot signed a 5-year contract paying him $3.4 million per season against the cap. Jeannot might be tougher, might be more violent, Dakota Joshua has more than one season where he was offensively relevant. I talked about this on the podcast, and I think it's getting proven true over time. The market inefficiency, the things that teams are looking for, because free agency is so bad this year, and because the inflation of contracts is so wild, what teams are looking for are guys with term. Look who the Leafs traded for at the trade deadline. They got Scott Laughton. I know a lot of Leaf fans were like, oh, he was a little disappointing. He makes $1.5 million. He goes to free agency this year. Guaranteed he makes at least 4.5, if not 5. Go look at his career numbers. Yes, he is. Brandon Carlo. They got the Bruins to retain on him for multiple years. That's a great deal and a great contract. Matthias Michelli, now Dakota Joshua. The Leafs keep acquiring guys with years left on their deal because they knew they were heading into, yes, a rising cap environment, but also a rising contract environment. The logic is there. The logic is big time there. Now, if you've been watching my videos for a long time, I thought the logic was there on a lot of Dubas moves. And the logic was sound on a lot of them. The execution, oof maroon. Dakota Joshua is a bet, but he's a fun one. And the most exciting part for me, the Leafs are pretty obviously not done this summer. Maybe they just trade a guy or two away, get a couple picks, and it's as simple as that. Or maybe they got something else cooking. So, what do you think? Bit of a risky bet, but it could pay off big time. He's only been in the playoffs once, but he was really, really good. And he was on an upward trajectory before obviously getting tripped up with a scare last summer. Either way, beef! And it follows the theme of what I was telling you the last few times we talked and the last few times the Leafs went out and got someone. Henry Thrun doesn't fight all the time, but he'll go. All throughout the roster, it's guys who will go. The head coach and one of his assistants already know the guy and like him. What do you think? Leave a comment in the comment box down below, but for now, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. Dakota Joshua is a Leaf. Again.